Where were you October 17th, 1989, Game 2 World Series? I know where I was, and I'll tell you at the end of this video. Join me as I destroy and annihilate 10 Major League Baseball cards from stars who have either been accused of juicing or admitted to juicing. For further reference, I will be using the term juiced. I will not be using the other abbreviations just because I don't want this video to be flagged. A lot of these players have not admitted to doing the juicing. We will just assume that they're innocent until proven guilty, if that is such the case. The majority of these players could be considered Hall of Famers. And I want you to guess, there's one player on here that actually made the Hall of Fame. The majority of these, if they were never accused, would be in the Hall of Fame. Two of these players are honorable mention. One of the players has actually never been accused of juicing. Another player can change the course and history of the rest of these players and get all of them, or the majority of them, into the Hall of Fame if they are accepted in the Hall of Fame. At number 1 we have David Justice. Now, of course, David played with Atlanta and eventually played for the Yankees in 2000 along with Roger Clemens. And he won 2 World Series, one with Atlanta, one with the Yankees. Was a very good hitter, very good player, good fielder. Something miraculously happened. You know, he averaged like 20, 22 home runs a season. And then all of a sudden in 2000, he had 42 home runs at the age of 34. And so later we find out that he was mentioned as one of the 86 players in the Mitchell Report, which is an independent investigation done by MLB and the U.S. government along with Senator George Mitchell. One of the rats who, implicated a lot of the players, his name was Radomski. Radomski said that he had receipts and phone calls from Justice showing that he purchased juice. And he actually saw Justice talking to and being treated by McNamee, who was the Yankees strength manager who was implicated with working with Roger Clemens. Number 2 on my list, who has been accused of juicing in the past, but made it into Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame, Ivan Pudge Rodriguez. Probably one of the greatest catchers that's ever lived, maybe behind Johnny Bench. 13-time Gold Glove winner, 13 times, and has got like 2,800 hits, won a championship in 2003 with the Marlins. Great catcher. And the only reason I put him on here is because he's been accused by so many people. But for the most part, it's just innuendo. Frank Thomas, actually, in 2017, when fingers were pointing at Thomas whether he ever juiced, and Thomas says, well, 2 of the players being inducted have been known to do it. So the finger was pointing at Ivan and Jeff Bagwell. So this is my number 2. Now, number 3 might be one of the easiest ones to do of these. I would say he's the Screech of baseball. Now, Screech, Dustin Diamond, was a character on Saved by the Bell. He was on the show several seasons. And then when he realized that the show was over and he couldn't use the people around him any longer, and when he wasn't making any more money from the show, he was an opportunist. So he wrote a book, and he was ratting out and telling on all the cast members he was done with them, so he was going to use them. Well, this guy did the same thing, and he wrote a book called Juiced. And he's the one that implicated a lot of these players on here. Let's talk about the good. I will say 2 things for Jose Canseco. Number 1, he did make it to the 40-40 club. 40-40 club is basically when you have 40 stolen bases and 40 home runs in the same year. He's one of only 4 players to ever do that. Put the other 3 in the comment section. So he did that. He played 17 years, and he is one of the only players, if not the only player, to admit out of all these players that he not only did it, but he did it to enhance his performance. Now with the bad, this guy is almost at the zenith of all these players, these great players who would have been Major League Baseball stars without juicing. He's at the zenith of all them starting. If you see all these great players, Ivan, you see Mark McGwire, you see Roger Clemens, this guy is the one that introduced it to him, and he admits in the book that he did. He admits that he's the godfather of juicing. He's the one that and he claims in the book that he introduced Jason Giambi, Mark McGwire, Roger Clemens, Juan Gonzalez, Ivan Rodriguez, Rafael Palmeiro. He's the one that started all these guys supposedly to juicing, according to him. He said that Major League Baseball saw that problem in Jose Canseco, and they were trying to get him out of the league. Well, rightfully so. The guy's a creep. But yet Jose will pat himself on the back, and he's like, I'm the one that introduced it, so I'm the one that should get credit for getting rid of it because I wrote a book. No, you're a screech, dude. You're a screech. And you were my hero as a kid. I collected all your cards as a kid. Look at all these Jose Canseco cards I had. I can't even give these things away. You should have never been in Major League Baseball. You were not good. The only reason you were good is because you could hit home runs. You had a horrible batting average. They put you at first base. They put you at right field, one of the worst positions on the field. And preferably, they put you designated here so they wouldn't have to put you on the field to defend. You're a rotten player. You're a rotten human being. And I'm glad to destroy your car. Now you're juiced, buddy. So number 4 is a little bit more difficult for me to do just because of who he was beside. But this guy also did play for the A's as well, and he played for the Cardinals later on. So at number 4, we have James Hetfield. I mean Mark McGwire. Now, Mark McGwire later admitted to Bob Costas on ESPN that he did juice, but the only reason he juiced is just to get over injuries. He would do it during the off season. He did testify in front of Congress in 2005. He did plead the fifth for most things, but he said he was there just to help if possible. I do think Mark McGwire is one player that could have made the Hall of Fame easily if he didn't juice. If you saw how he played in the 80s, he was just amazing, in early 90s. But as he started juicing more and more, you could see it did perfect his performance in a positive way. I do think he was influenced by Canseco, one of the Bash brothers. And I think Canseco is kind of like one of those bad kids that come to school that affect good kids. I think Canseco robbed McGwire of the Hall of Fame just by introducing him to juice. And Canseco even admitted in his book that he would juice Mark McGwire personally. But what really put him on the edge is when he got 70 home runs in 1998. Sammy Sosa became a close second, but 70 home runs he smashed, beating the all-time home run record for a single season. No player had even come close to that. You know, I remember in the early 80s and late 70s, you would see the likes of George Foster, Jim Rice, Darryl Strawberry, Mike Schmidt, Dale Murphy, Reggie Jackson. These players would get like 30-some or 40-some home runs. No one even came close to 70 home runs. But he was getting 70 home runs against the greatest pitchers in the world. But you know, when you see a player in the late 80s looking like this, to then looking like this.
Jesus pitched well against Atlanta, had some problems too.
Where the man looked like Popeye with friggin' steel arms. He looked like a bodybuilder, Superman style. I mean, what the heck? Obvious he was putting something more in his morning coffee than sugar and cream. With that said, he was up for the Hall of Fame 10 years, and he only got 24% of the vote. Do you think that Mark McGwire will be inducted to the Hall of Fame one day? I don't know. Now, with the baseball cards I'm deciding to shred of players who've been accused of juicing, number 5 I do believe should be in the Hall of Fame. Number 5 is probably the greatest pitcher that's ever existed in the game, maybe behind Nolan Ryan, and that is Roger Clemens. Now, Roger Clemens was mentioned in the Mitchell Report several times, and later McNamee, who was Clemens' Yankees strength training coach in 2000, stated that Clemens was juicing. And Jose Canseco, remember I said Jose was linked to all these guys. Hey, Jose Canseco has been indicted. He's got an ankle bracelet on. Of course he's got time to write a book. He was actually subpoenaed to testify before Congress in 2008, and Clemens vehemently denied ever juicing. He was actually indicted, and he was tried for perjury, and actually Clemens won on the second trial. Say what you want about Roger Clemens, but his record on the field is immaculate. His win-loss ratio is 354-184. He's got over 4,600 strikeouts. He's an 11-time All-Star. 2 World Series championships in 99 and 2000 with the New York Yankees. 7-time Cy Young Award winner. 2 Triple Crowns. 4-time Major League Baseball wins leader, 5 times American League strikeout leader, and even though he's never had a no-hitter, he's had 20 strikeout games. Twice. Now, so what's keeping him out of the Hall of Fame? Now, last year, he did get 67% of the vote for the Hall of Fame nomination. That's pretty close. I think the only thing keeping him out now is maybe because people don't like him, and he's had a bad reputation off the field, that he's a butthole sometimes. He's had affairs on his wife. There was a rumor starting in 1990 that he had an affair with a 15-year-old Minnie McCready, who since later passed away. Again, if they were only electing saints to the Hall of Fame, then no one would get in. I believe should be in the Hall of Fame one day, maybe not yet, but one day, is Gary Sheffield. Gary's one of the greatest hitters of all time. He played 23 years. He played with the Marlins. He won a championship with the Marlins. He's played with the Yankees, the Brewers, the Dodgers. And he's got like over 500, I think he had like 506 home runs. He had a batting average of .292, 5-time Silver Slugger, 9-time All-Star, over 1,600 RBIs, over 2,600 overall hits. I don't think juicing is keeping him out of the Hall. Lack of defensive playing is hurting him. Of course, he was in the right field where a lot of the teams will put their worst defensive players. And so when he ranks in the metrics, he's not one of the best defensive players. But in 2001, it was found out that the cream that he was applying to an injury on the knee did have juice in it. He was training with Barry Bonds in 2001. And then Sheffield said, hey, I didn't know anything about it. And if you look at my record, it shows that my performance wasn't enhanced at all by using the juice. So he's been eligible for about 5 years, and he would only get like 16% of the vote. You'd have to get about 75% or more in order to get into the Hall of Fame. But the last year of eligibility, he did get up to 30%. So I can see him actually making it. Number 7 on my list is not in the Hall of Fame, but he is one of only 4 players in his career to have over 500 home runs and 3,000 hits. He played for the Texas Rangers. He played for the Cubs and a few other teams. He's a first baseman, and I don't think he was a bad defensive player whatsoever. But unfortunately for him, he was one of the only players to test and was positive for juice in 2003, and he was suspended for 10 games. Later, his name was on the Mitchell report, and he did testify before Congress. And he vehemently denied not ever knowing juicing.
Never. The reference to me in Mr. Canseco's book is absolutely false.
He's like, look, I never juiced. I promise you it was a mistake. A B12 supplement he was given had juice in it. And B12, as we know, is found in meat. It's for nerve and DNA and blood health. He was found positive for the juice. Jose Canseco, we hear that name again, in the book Juice, said that he personally gave Rafael Palmeiro the juice. Rafael Palmeiro was considered for the Hall of Fame a few years. He got over 5% of the vote, but unfortunately his last year qualifying he got 4%, so he's now off the ballot. But I think one day Rafael Palmeiro could actually make it to the Hall. And actually he came out of retirement at the age of 53 and played for an independent league in central United States and Canada and had 6 home runs. It's crazy. Rafael Palmeiro. Number 8. And this one's a little bit more difficult to do just because I think this guy's a good person. I've seen him in interviews. Seems sweet. Seems like a really good, easygoing guy. Sammy Sosa. Played for the Cubs, White Sox, several other teams. He is not in the Hall of Fame either. He's been accused of juicing. He was named in the Mitchell report, I believe, and he did testify before Congress in 2005. One reason his name comes up for juicing is a New York Times reporter, through undisclosed things, said that Sosa was on the list of an internal investigation by MLB, stating that he was one of the players that was tested to have been juicing. But he has testified, and he diligently denies ever juicing. Says, I've never juiced before, and it's never happened before. Well, what was miraculous, in 1998, he got 66 home runs and fell short of Mark McGwire's 70 home runs. So this is a player that was always, decent, But all of a sudden, his home run record just increased by 20, 30, 40. And his attorney did most of the talking for him during his testimony before Congress, which is his right to do. It's funny, he seemed to speak really good English before that, and a lot of people have mentioned when he started getting accused in 2002, 2003, all of a sudden his English started getting really bad. He was right field, right? So we see some kind of trend with the people who have been accused of juicing playing first baseman in right field. He did play a lot of years, and he had a whopping 609 home runs. He had over 1,600 runs batted in, and he had only a little bit over 2,400 hits in his career. And that doesn't seem like a lot. It's not, but if you've never made it to the pros before, you try getting 2,400 hits in the major leagues. Now, he has been eligible for the Hall of Fame, and he's been as low as 6% of the vote, and he's gone as high, I think, as 13 or 16%, which you need 75%, over 75% of the vote in order to get in the Hall of Fame. So we'll see in 2022 if he gets in. Now, I'm not so sure if number 9 should be on the list, and I'll give you my reasons why here shortly. Juan Gonzalez now has played for the Texas Rangers. He's played for Cleveland, and then he went back to Texas, and he played for a couple of other teams. He was more known as a line drive hitter than a home run hitter. However, he did have over 400 home runs, I believe, 434. He had several bats. He played several years. He's gotten up to 5-6% in 2011 when it came up to his nomination for the Hall of Fame, and then he shortly got less than 5%. And of course, as you know, you got to have 75%. The reason he's been accused, of course, well, he was on the Mitchell Report, and on the Mitchell Report, it did mention something about when he was with Cleveland and he was going to Canada with customs with the team. There was a bag, and it was like a he said, she said, and that was in the Mitchell Report. Jose Canseco, in his book Juice, said that Juan was juicing. And then in the mid-2000s, when Texas Rangers acquired Juan once again for like $24 million, he got injured, and his career went, kaput from there. And the owner at the time for Texas Rangers said, "Hey, look, we just threw $24 million away. He got injured, and we feel like that he stopped doing the juice, and that they just lost $24 million." Again, it's all speculation. Juan has vehemently denied that he ever juiced. Does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I think there's a lot of better players that would be a better fit for the Hall of Fame than Juan Gonzalez. I'm sorry. Now, number 10 shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. Just like Roger Clemens, if you deduct and subtract the juicing allegations, this guy would already be in. He's San Francisco Giant and Pittsburgh Pirate great Barry Bonds. Now, Barry played a lot of years, and let me tell you what some of his achievements are. 14-time All-Star, 7-time National League MVP, 8-time Gold Glove Award winner, 762 home runs, 514 stolen bases. That's almost a 300 batting average, and for a home run slugger, that is just incredible. And he's got the most home runs in any single season at 73 home runs in 2001. So there's no doubt, offense and defense, he is one of the greatest players that's ever lived. And he was originally accused by Balco, who was a company out of California that was known to give high-performance athletes juice. And Barry Bonds was accused and indicted of perjury for lying about that use in 2007. So Barry was also mentioned in the Mitchell Report, and you cannot deny his change in physical ability and look over the years. I mean, look at him from the Pirates to 2001 when he had all those home runs. So Barry said that he accidentally was given the juice by his trainer, and it's supposed to be for an injury in the form of flaxseed and some arthritis cream. And he said he had no idea that that juice was in there. 2007, Barry Bonds was charged, arrested, and found guilty of perjury. He was sentenced to 30 days in-house arrest, a 250-hour community service, money, and a tarnish on his reputation. However, Barry later appealed that and actually won out of court. Barry has come very close at getting to the Hall of Fame with like 61%, 69%. So he's right there with Roger Clemens, and I think it's just a matter of time before he'll be inducted. Number 10. As promised, I had mentioned 2 honorable mentions, And we got 1 and 2. I want to do this one first and then this one last. The first one used to play for the Expos. Learn how to switch hit by the time he was 9 years old. This one I'm actually not going to shred, and I'll tell you why. The last one we're going to shred is not going to be eligible to the Hall of Fame until next year. Who is this? The one that I will not be shredding actually has never been accused of juicing. But in my opinion, he's probably the greatest baseball player who's ever played, and he is not in the Hall of Fame. Yes. Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose. In my opinion, one of the greatest players who's ever played. He's got the most games and has played in the most games in Major League Baseball history. He, of course, started out with Cincinnati Reds. He ended his career with the Reds. He was manager to the end until he was accused of betting. And he also played with the Philadelphia Phillies. That's how I know him, with Mike Schmidt in the early 80s. I used to watch him all the time. He's got a batting average of .303, which is incredible. 160 home runs, 4,256 hits. He's the leading hitter in Major League Baseball history. Played first, second, third base, left field, right field, center field, and he's even played catcher. Y'all know why he wasn't inducted? Because he was caught betting. It should be taken in consideration that he was doing something off the field, even though he was managing. Don't get me wrong, there's no excuse for it, but I think they should consider him for the Hall, and this is one reason why I'm not shredding his card. It doesn't really matter, it's a 5-cent card. And finally, our last card and last player who was accused of juicing, and I said earlier will be eligible for the Hall of Fame next year, the one and only Alex Rodriguez. Not only did he admit to using it because he was using it for ailments, but he actually said he wanted to help his batting. So he's one of the only ones that has actually fessed up to it and admitted to it. He's one of the only players that has been suspended for 1 year for using, and that was in 2014. The man has racked up some impressive numbers. He's like the 4th all-time leading home run leader. He's got a total of 696 home runs, 3,115 hits, 14-time All-Star, 2009 World Series champion, and he was an outstanding defensive fielder at shortstop and third base. He was a great fielder. And I had mentioned earlier, his induction to the Hall of Fame, I don't know if it'll be next year, but when he is inducted, it will pave the way for these other players.
Other than Jose Canseco.
To get inducted to the Hall of Fame, because most of them are great players. So, as I promised earlier in this video, where were you October 17th, 1989 during the California earthquake during Game 2 of the Oakland A's and San Francisco World Series?
At second base, so the Oakland A's take.
I'll tell you what, we're having an earthquake.
I could tell you where I was. I was 14 years old in the 8th grade, and my dad decided to take me and my brother to a preseason NBA game, Pistons against the Supersonics. And during halftime, over the intercom, they announced that there was a huge earthquake in California, and it measured 6.9 on the Richter scale. And everybody in the audience, you could hear them just like, and I didn't even know what that meant. So where were you then during Game 2 of the California earthquake? So I'm going to leave it up to you. Do you believe these players that are accused of juicing, do you believe that they should be in the Hall of Fame? In the comment section, tell me which ones you do believe should be in the Hall of Fame and why. We do know that this started way before the 1980s. Actually, Tom House, who played for the Atlanta Braves, he was a pitcher who gained like 40 pounds of muscle in the 70s, admitted to the San Francisco Chronicle that yes, even in the 70s, they were juicing. So it didn't just start in the 80s with McGwire and Canseco. I will say, though, baseball is a kid's game. It was meant for kids. It's not meant for grown men and women to be playing professionally and getting paid millions of dollars. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan. I love baseball. I'm glad they are. I'm a capitalist. I believe that you should get paid for your skill. And these players, even if they're juicing or not, they're the greatest athletes that the world has ever seen, and only a few handful of people are able to do what they do. And you'll know that a lot of these players could have easily made it into the Hall of Fame if they didn't juice. Yeah, they might not be getting 70 home runs a game, but they might be getting 30 or 40. That's still amazing, right? It's just a shame. And, you know, when money's involved with anything, it kind of corrupts and makes everything a little bit dirty. There's not just an incentive to the players. There's an incentive, of course, to the owners, to the managers, to the corporations, and everybody around the sport, and all the profit that's made around the sport. They have an incentive for there to be 70 home runs a game per player, and for players to knock it out of the park. There's an incentive to that. So I'm not going to 100% blame the players on it. So tell me what your opinion is. Make sure you subscribe, and catch you on the next one.